All right, let's get going here. So guys, thank you very much for coming today. We have an amazing final talk. We're going to talk to, do I call you the founder? Do I call you a...
I'm a code contributor to Morpheus.
Code contributor.
I've worked my way up to number 2 on the GitHub. So, you know,
number 2 on the GitHub. So
out of 300, that's pretty good.
That's pretty good. How did you get 300 people? Let's start there. Like before we even get started, first let's do a quick explanation or introduction to Morpheus, and then being that Morpheus is an open source project, how is it to get, how complex is it to attract community contribution? Is that a hard thing? What goes into that?
So incentives are a hell of a drug.
That's for sure.
And if you incentivize builders, they will come, right? So you look at the coders in Morpheus have earned $30 million in rewards.
Wow.
Since the launch, right, in just a year. So that attracted all these top talent engineers who wanted to contribute code and get paid for it. Right? No bureaucracy, no grants, no committees, no applications, just ship good code. If it gets merged by the maintainer, you get rewarded, right? So you created an open marketplace where the coders are effectively selling their code and the maintainers are buying their code. I'm a big fan of free markets for like literally everything. And so you can think of Morpheus as 4 marketplaces. Everybody knows about the fair launch, right? Over $2 billion have gone through the smart contracts. Those are capital contributors, and they're all competing to provide their yield from staked ETH into the protocol, right? There's another competition for coders. There's another competition for compute providers, and finally builders, anybody that releases a smart agent or an application on Morpheus, people can stake towards their subnet and get rewarded directly by the protocol. And that's kicked out $1 million of rewards just in the first 30 days.
On the builders?
On builders since that went live in January.
Wow.
Like, so the whole flywheel is going now. So, but to go to your question, like who is already familiar with Morpheus? Quick show of hands. A lot of people in the audience, maybe about half, but it's effectively a platform for people building smart agents in the same way Ethereum is a platform for people building smart contracts, right? So Morpheus is not building any agents. It's not training any models. It's created an aggregation layer, a router, a marketplace for those things. So anybody building an agent can register it on Morpheus. Anybody creating a model can route that compute, right? That's the idea, is create the infrastructure people need to build these smart agents.
Okay, so you talk about smart agents. Can you explain, in your view, what is a smart agent?
So I wrote a paper a couple of years ago in 23 called the Smart Agents Protocol. And I was like, hey guys, this AI thing is wonderful, but it needs a payment rail. You need to be able to connect the AI directly to Web3. And the best way to do that is through somebody's individual wallet, right? So you can have a personal smart agent that works for you, not some government, not some company. It's aligned to you. I think the only way we do alignment is to the individual. I don't believe in any of this nonsense about collective alignment. That doesn't work in economics, doesn't work in technology. Like, I want personal choice and the agent to align to my values, not somebody else. So a smart agent simply is an agent that can use smart contracts, it can act on chain, and you think about how powerful that is. Huge. Like, it's 2025 and Google doesn't have a Web3 wallet. How crazy is that? But it's because they're a centralized company. They don't want to be a financial intermediary. They don't want to do KYC. They don't want to pay for AML, right? That would be a lot of friction in their system. Totally. So they're like, no, we're just going to give you information, right? We're just going to tell you how to do it. So all of their systems are crippled. All of the centralized AIs are fundamentally crippled because they can't take action for you. So as soon as you have a smart agent, it can pay other agents. It can do a transaction, it can do a swap. It can actually use money to take economic action. So that's why I think we're seeing this huge acceleration, is because they're so much more powerful than just information-based AI.
Okay, so when I first heard about Morpheus, the origin story was about, and why it went open source was due to some of the regulation challenges we were facing during that period. Has things evolved since the new, because I don't even think I've seen you since the new administration really came in. Have things evolved in your view on things since the new administration's come in?
So anybody's not familiar, in 23, they basically tried to kill open source artificial intelligence by passing a ban on literally the math They said if you held the database of weights, that was a felony to give to a foreign person. Like, this is crazy 1990s crypto wars style when they tried to ban encryption back in the 90s, right? And what did Phil Zimmerman famously do in 1995? He open sourced PGP. He printed it in books. He put it on T-shirts and walked over the border and said, go ahead and arrest me. And they did. But he won in court because for some reason the courts were unwilling to ban books, T-shirts, language, math. Something about the First Amendment, at least in 1995, was still strong enough, right? So that's the environment that we're in 23. And Morpheus and the white paper came out just 1 month before that executive order, right? So we were in this dystopian timeline where the state was trying to ban open source AI, which would have been terrible, right? Because you would have had the worst actors, the centralized players would have had all the power, and the individual would have effectively had a crippled model, right? So we're past that.
Where are we now?
So now that we're past, like, the state's trying to control it, the new executive order just swept away all those crazy regulations, right? And the open source models have caught up and exceeded the power of the closed source models, right? So if you look at DeepSeek or Llama, like, they're better than ChatGPT. It's like, why would I use ChatGPT if the open source one's more powerful and I can keep my privacy and I can get all the benefits to me, not to Sam Altman, right? So what we're headed in, we still have one boss to go. We still have to defeat the final boss, which is extractive AI. Like, okay, we got past the states, but there's still a bunch of companies and bad actors. I mean, just look at what happened with Lazarus and the big hack the other day of Safe and BitBite, right? That was somebody using tools to trick people into stealing their money. Like, that's what we still have to get past.
How do we get past that?
So I wrote an article a few weeks ago about super agents. I think the only way we solve this is you're going to have a personal super agent that's going to represent you in the agentic economy. You're not going to be able to sift through 1 million agents.
No way.
Know which ones of them are honest, all this kind of stuff. You need an agent that's aligned to you. And I introduced this concept that it needs to be a fiduciary. In the same way we think about that in the legal or financial context. Like, let me tell you, the AI from Google is not a fiduciary to you. They're creating value for their shareholders. They're happy to mine all your data.
That's a very interesting concept.
Right? They're changing your opinion. They're manipulating you. And that's not even like a Lazarus level bad actor who are just straight up trying to steal all your stuff. You're not going to be able to keep up with 150 IQ agents coming at you every day. You're going to want to interact with your personal agent who's aligned to your outcomes, who's a fiduciary to you, and is representing you and recommending how to interact and what to do based on the outcomes you want. So I think that's a powerful concept.
You know, I don't know if you have any input on this, but I was talking to someone recently about how they go to people go to AI agents now today more than Google for search.
100%.
I do it as well. What do you think is the future of, like, the ad network business in a way? Like, what do you think is how does the commerce, advertising, agent world coexist?
So I think the old model is dead, where they just took all your data and gave you back like 1% as a free product. What it's going to force people to do is actually share value with the end user. So it's not that advertisements will go away. It's just right now they're making $10,000 or $20,000 per person off your data. Like, your data is really valuable, and people are used to getting paid almost nothing for that, right? So somebody releases a model and they start sharing the value. People will probably opt in to selling their data if they can control what gets sold. Yeah, I don't care if you know I went to Starbucks. Yeah, you can use that geo data, right? If I get $100 a year, right? And so we're going to have a free market for data emerge, and it's going to force more of the value to flow back to the people.
Sure.
That's what I want to see.
And do you think there's going to be an element of, like, how Google, for example, presents or promotes certain types of content? When I'm using Grok or ChatGPT or Venice, who's making the decisions of what content or where I'm going to transact?
So that's the benefit of the open source models, is you know what the bias is. It's not that the models have no bias, but at least you know what the bias is.
That's fair.
What it was trained on. And I love Venice for this reason. You can go in and set the system prompt yourself, right? They've ripped out all the censorship and like the parentalism, like kind of treating people like children. They ripped that's all in the system prompt in these closed systems.
Sure.
So when they ripped that out, you now get the God power, and you can set the system prompt the way you want it, right? And you could effectively set that bias or that value that the model thinks about when it responds to you, right? And so that's the big benefit here, is it puts you in the driver's seat.
Okay, got it. Let's talk a little bit about use cases, because I think at the end of the day, for people to really understand the power of AI agents, we need to connect it back to use cases. And I think it's actually been one of the biggest challenges in crypto at large, has been the consumer level applications and use cases. Have there been any, have you seen any, or have you imagined any top tier use cases that you want to see exist or even in the works within the Morpheus ecosystem?
So, I mean, hands down, Venice is the killer app. They're getting close to 1 million users, over 100,000 daily actives. Like, that's crazy. Yeah. Like, this thing is sticky. People actually like this whole free AI idea. Totally. And what are they doing? They're doing text, they're doing images, they're doing code. Like, we already know from ChatGPT what the killer apps are.
Totally.
We're just giving people an alternative that's open source, private, faster, cheaper, better.
But I do know a lot of people that when, or at least like the less savvy technically people, they get this AI bot, they get this chat bot, and they have no idea what to do with it.
Right.
And how do we solve for that? Because there is no UI. So your UI is basically limited to what you understand or your imagination. So how do we create user experiences or applications even that are going to be understandable and digestible for people? Like, how is my dad going to know how to use ChatGPT or an AI model or an open source one or Venice or whatever it might be?
So just a few days ago, put out a web version of the More Agents, the local install, but now in a web context where you can run your super agent and connect it to your wallet, and it's going to recommend to you what agents to use.
Wow.
So you don't have to be technical or have that knowledge.
So discoverability becomes built into the agent itself.
100%. So there's all these agents out there. There's 20,000 now. How do I know which one to use? Well, if I talk to my super agent and I say I want to do a swap, great. There's already an agent that's been fine-tuned for that, and a lot of people have used, and I don't need to go find it. This solves discoverability.
Is there a social component to this, or is this like a complete like siloed, like, you know what I mean? Because I don't know how the data, I don't know how data gets like compiled in this way, because if it's your super agent, is it accessing some type of information to understand which agents might be best for you? Is there any kind of social validation or data that's going to be driving those types of influences?
So the major piece of Morpheus is a decentralized router and a decentralized registry.
Can you explain the router a little bit? Yeah.
So if you guys have used inference at all as a developer, like you choose the model, hey, I want to use Llama 3.1 or I want to use DeepSeek, right? What Morpheus is doing is it's just taking that intent from the user and routing it down to somebody hosting that model. Maybe they're on Akash or Hyperbolic or BitTensor or one of these other networks, right? And it's connecting that user to the person providing it. The same thing with agents. So anybody can build an agent. Morpheus doesn't care if you use Virtuals or Eliza or any other framework. If you register that agent on Morpheus, it becomes discoverable. People can pay you for it. It can monetize.
Okay, so that's
you can launch a
interesting.
subnet and people can stake towards your agent. Like, it's handling discoverability, monetization, payments, all that kind of stuff. Again, Morpheus is not building any agents any more than the Ethereum Foundation is out there building smart contracts, right? They let Uniswap and Aave and Compound and all these independent groups build the stuff. Morpheus is just creating that infrastructure.
Okay, so this is the today was all about tokenomics. So I want to talk a little bit about like the More token launch, and also how some of the applications are capitalizing on this and leveraging it. So, I mean, you guys attracted, what was it, 400 million?
Over $2 billion has been deposited and withdrawn from the contract for staked ETH, yeah.
Wow. So what do you think made the model successful, and do you think it's obviously not to the extent, but do you think it's replicable for projects that are starting to build? Can they use this to maybe get beyond some of the bootstrapping phase?
So effectively what attracted me when I first read the white paper was the whole fair launch, right? There was no pre-mine, there's no treasury, there's no company, there's no founders, right? We are all Morpheus, right? In the same way we're all Satoshi,
Sure.
right? That's important. And because you had that fair start, the only people that own the tokens are the people that earn them, whether they provided capital or code. But yes, the mechanism itself of having staked ETH and go to Lido, deposit your ETH, now you've got STETH, you put that in the contract and people kept their liquidity. Yep. They could withdraw their staked ETH whenever they wanted. There's like a 7-day period, and then whenever you wanted, you could pull it out. And so I had the same number of ETH as when I started. So I might as well stake it towards a cool open source project and just direct the yield. So you disconnected the principal, like I want to hold ETH long term, from what I do with the yield. And the truth is, most people weren't staking. I looked on chain at the data. 70% of people that participated in Morpheus weren't staking.
Wow.
Because I can see they went to Lido as the last transaction before they came to Morpheus because they needed to swap into staked ETH.
Yep.
Right? And so you had total liquidity, you weren't risking your principal, and it was effectively non-custodial.
Which is a rare, it's almost, I don't want to say risk-free, but like that is a very transformative way to acquire, assets in a new entity. What is like when we think about other startups trying to approach this? How viable is that for these other projects?
Well, that's effectively what the builder rewards are doing. So in Morpheus, 24% of the rewards go to builders, a quarter to all the other buckets I talked about. Mm-hmm. But think about that. You can launch on Morpheus and stake your more towards a builder the same way people staked ETH towards Morpheus.
And the more yield is what? How does that work?
And the more protocol yield is that 24% of emissions.
Got it.
Now directed to the builder. So you had the same aspects. I'm bullish on more. I don't want to sell my more.
Totally.
Cool. I'll just stake it towards a builder. They're going to give me some reward. That might be an NFT. Venice did their huge airdrop. That was like $15 million of Venice tokens to the Morpheus community because they were the early testers and they helped bootstrap it up. And, they staked more so they could get a pro account in Venice. Like projects can use that same model that Venice had, which was, okay, we're going to build on Morpheus. That brings us a big community. And then they can do an NFT or an airdrop, or maybe they just want to give pro accounts and treat it as a way to build up revenue for their project. But that extends that same fair launch mechanism to anybody without having to figure out tokenomics, without having to be super sophisticated, without creating your own smart contracts. Sure. You could just, literally, here's an ETH address, here's the name of our project, and an icon, and in a minute, you can register as a builder on more.org.
What learnings came? This was a new concept, and it was brand new. What were wins, losses, successes, flaws, things you might do differently? What was the learnings from this?
So a couple of things that the community learned is you really want to rely on the most robust infrastructure. The original paper actually proposed the yield source from Thorchain, but there wasn't enough liquidity there. It's also not rebasing style. You needed a token that you could bifurcate the rebase reward from the token itself, right? If the value just accrued into the token, it was harder to do that bifurcation. So picking Lido ended up being a really good change, even from what the original authors proposed. The other thing I would say is having a correlation between contributions and time. So initially there was no connection between how long you staked and the value that you got. And so one of the community proposals was like, hey guys, how about if I say I'll lock up my war rewards for 2 years? I should get a higher proportion of the rewards versus the guy that's just farming and dumping every day. Totally. Right? He's not adding much to the network. And so that proved super popular. The average coder has locked up their rewards for almost 4 years.
Wow.
Right? The diamond hands on this community is crazy. The average capital contributor has locked up their rewards for almost 3 years. Right? We're going to find out what that rate is for the compute providers now. They've got the ability to do that, and next will be the builders. Yep. Right? And so by introducing time, you could filter for people that actually cared about the project and wanted it to succeed, and they can express that. But the beauty was you still had your liquidity.
Yes.
You weren't locking up your ETH, you were locking up your future more rewards. So you preserved the original fundamentals that were really exciting to people. Is I've still got liquidity in my ETH, but yeah, I'm willing to diamond hands the actual more rewards.
And outside of staking more to other projects, are there other sinks, I guess, if you will, for the Morpheus token?
Sure. So if you look at, okay, what happens to the yields when it comes in? It goes not to a treasury, but to protocol-owned liquidity, right? What does that mean? It buys tokens, more tokens, off the Uniswap pool every 5 minutes of every day of every year. So what happens then to those more tokens? Half are burned forever, and the other half get locked up as this recycled block reward for the next epoch. That was one of the things that really impressed me about the tokenomics of Morpheus is Bitcoin made this decision, okay, we're going to have a hard cap, but yeah, we run out of emissions eventually. Don't worry about it. It's 2140. Fees will probably be enough. And Ethereum said, no. We always need an emission, but eventually they added burning, so don't worry, that'll take care of the scarcity. Totally. But Morpheus actually came up with a clever solution. There's a hard cap of 42 million, but because of the recycling of the block reward and the burning mechanism, it'll be something less than 42 million, and it never runs out. Because every 16 years, it reinstantiates those locked tokens as the next block reward.
I see. I didn't realize that.
So you can have both. You can have a hard cap that will never be broken and incentives that don't run out. So if you look at the long tail emissions, the chart goes out to like 256 years for Morpheus, which I love because that's how you build a larger network effect. Is you have to have this fair competition continue and don't cut people off like, oh, it's been 4 years, we've got all the token holders we need. No, like people discovered Bitcoin 5, 6, 7 years in, and they were still early compared to the 130-year schedule. So I'm a big fan of having big network effects that fairly reward people over time, and this is a pretty clever way to do that.
If you think out to 5 years from now, what is Morpheus's ecosystem and what does Morpheus look like in 5 years?
Tens of thousands of builders, thousands of capital contributors, hundreds or thousands of coders, and billions of dollars of people staking value. I mean, there's a proposal right now in the community to extend it from just staked ETH.
I was just about to ask that.
Into wrapped Bitcoin, into USDC, into USDT, into Coinbase wrapped Bitcoin, all on Aave. So it's another way you could create yield and put it into the protocol, and then you go from just people bullish on Ethereum to people bullish on Bitcoin to people bullish on holding stable coins.
Explain the Aave component. So if I collateralize Bitcoin,
sure, you get a certain percent interest from Aave. They give you an BTC token or whatever.
Yeah, they do.
Right, then you can put that in the Morpheus contract and direct the yield into the protocol and liquidity. Now you're competing not on TVL, but on yield. What's the US dollar USDC value of the ETH, Bitcoin, or stablecoin that you're providing?
Sure.
Let's divide that up, and now proportionally the rewards are going to those people.
Is there any what would be the opposing view for that? Like, is there a reason why we wouldn't want more options and more competing yield scenarios?
I couldn't find a strong one. Maybe it would be sort of risky if it was like a minor asset.
Okay.
But I think for like the big reserve currencies, stablecoins, Bitcoin, Ethereum, probably Solana, like those 4 or 5 have a lot of liquidity, a lot of maturity, and there's a lot of long-term holders. But you're expanding the pool of potential capital contributors from $300 billion to $2 trillion. And so whatever people's opinions are that I'm not a maxi, I'm a freedom maximalist. Right? What I want is the best outcome for the community. And because Morpheus is agnostic, it should embrace all the chains.
Okay. So, like, what would you say? I got a couple more questions. I know we're running low on time, but a couple more. So, what would you say is like a misconception that the public has about decentralized AI that you'd love to debunk for the, because I think that there's just a lot of talk right now, and I'd love to hear what you think.
So one, you got to break down like who's doing what in the ecosystem. The most common question I get is, oh, isn't Morpheus competing with Project XYZ?
Sure.
And I have to explain, like, No, they're doing different parts of the tech stack.
I didn't even realize that you can use a Virtuals or Eliza and then register.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
So imagine you've got Noose, which is a subnet on BitTensor, training the model, and you got somebody hosting a GPU on Akash using that model, and the Morpheus is routing that inference to somebody like Venice, who's connecting it to an end user. Like that's a very complementary tech stack, and Morpheus is effectively building the demand for what all these other protocols are creating the supply.
Sure.
Right? If you're building agents or models or GPUs, go for it. Like Morpheus is your customer, it's your user, it's building demand for what you're creating. So if I could dispel one myth, I think that would be it. Like these things are highly complementary and they actually grow together.
Okay, and second question here would be, if you could wave a magic wand and solve one technical challenge that Morpheus is facing today, what would you try to solve? What would you face? What would be that problem?
I think this all boils down to interfaces, right? The big promise here is AI will be the front end and blockchain can be the back end. Mm-hmm. So we need an influx this year of more developers focused on the front end.
Yep.
Right? We've got all the tools now. We've got all the building blocks. Everything is live. Now it's about bringing it into the front end. So if you're a developer in that area, I would love to talk to you. Happy to connect you to maintainers. There's a lot of rewards for people that want to build the front ends.
Okay, so and my final question was about how do people get involved? So obviously, one, if you're a coder, front ends is obviously a huge opportunity right now. What are some of the other like low-hanging fruit ways that people could start to get involved? Let's say for the non-technical talent, or just anyone who wants to start to contributing to the ecosystem.
If you got capital, bring capital. If you got compute, bring compute. If you're a builder, keep in mind, you don't have to be very technical at this point to be a builder. The agent tools that just got released for the decentralized forge on Morpheus are no code.
Wow.
You literally drag and drop. I want the Venice model. I'm going to connect it to this app. I want the memory stored here. You push one button and it's created, right? So don't think builder equals engineer. We are all engineers now.
Yep.
Right? That's the magic of what AI is doing, is it's making all of these building opportunities accessible to everybody.
That's great. Any other final words here?
No, man. Appreciate you doing the interview.
No, this is
Big
fun.
Fan of what you're building as well.
Thank
you for being a pioneer in the community.
I'm really excited about this. I mean, as you guys know, one of our big theses as an investor is really trying to support this next wave of the internet. And we've been very kind of involved in trying to amplify platforms and protocols that we think are approaching it right and really have the right intentions for this space. And Morpheus has obviously been one that we've been really supportive of. So I'm really excited about being able to speak to you today. Guys, go check out Morpheus. And thank you so much. This was great. Always, dude. Pleasure.